going to work out, you'll understand by looking at the interface itself. Okay, so it's just the understanding of interface very important because of the software. Okay, because of the software being vast. So that's one thing which we are going to look forward to do. Okay, so before starting with the session for today, like, is there any query, like any questions regarding the last session which we had taken up on BIM, regarding the discussions which we had, and if you all have gone back, read something, and if you all want to know anything about it, so if there is anything, just let me know right now. We can just discuss it over and then proceed forward with our introduction to the software. So anyone, any sort of questions regarding BIM, any sort of questions regarding Revit used in BIM, or any other software used in BIM? Anyone? Okay, so I guess yes.
Ma'am, I would like to know more about Revit used in BIM. Why Revit is being used in BIM,
Okay.
actually.
Okay, so basically, see, as today's session is an interface session, we'll be looking forward to the detailed software of Revit, like what are the things included. So you'll understand it better. But just to give you a gist, as I was telling yesterday as well, that Revit as a software is known as a documentation software. Okay, so it is known as a documentation software, and why it is known as a documentation software. So what are the documentation, especially the word documentation? Why is it implied? Is because in BIM, it's building information modeling. The information, that's the data which you're putting in. So the information is nothing but it's sort of a documentation which you're doing in any form, whether it's a plan view, whether it's section, whether it's elevation, or whether it's a list of documents regarding a particular element, regarding its costing, regarding its materials used, regarding manufacturing details, etc. All this is a data which is there, is an information. So that information is going to be used at different stages. So normally, how would this particular data, how it is going to be stored, is very important. So normally in a traditional method, it will be stored in different using different softwares. Your non-graphical data, that is regarding a material, regarding costing, etc., we might use a different software. For generation of drawings, that is your plan, sections, elevation, we might use a different software. At a very conceptual level as well, we might use a different software. Okay, so the major part is the information part. What if one software provides you with this? So that's the major turnaround. That's where Revit plays an important role. Revit, as a documentation software, which it is known as, is basically going to provide you, or give you the service of having all the information, whether it's graphical, that is generation of 3D, generation of your plan sections, that is your 2D drawings, then having your data storing capacity. Okay, data storage regarding its manufacturing details, regarding its materials, costing, extraction of data, that is extraction of the cost of a particular element, etc. That can be done in Revit. That's one single software, it is giving you those opportunities. Also, as I said, documentation, one of the major things in documentation is your construction drawings. That's your detailed drawings. So the level of detailing in Revit with respect to graphical as well as non-graphical data is very high. And that's the reason Revit is preferred. And that's the reason why we use Revit in BIM environment, because information. Clear? Clear?
Yes, ma'am, it's clear.
Sorry, but can I know your name exactly? What's your name? How is it pronounced?
Ma'am, it's Dina.
Okay, Dana. Okay, yeah, cool. Okay, yeah. So I guess anything else? Any questions? Any queries? Okay, so let's get started with the session. Before starting, just a small reminder: feel free to have your queries resolved in the session, in between session. So you all can just raise your hands. You all can just ping in the chat box. Okay, and we can just solve it there. Not an issue at all. Clear? So just feel free to do to put in your queries in the chats. No problem at all. Okay, so let's get started with it. So I'll just share my screen. If there is any issues in the screen share in between, just let me know. You all can unmute yourself and just let me know. Okay, so yeah. Okay, I hope my screen is visible to you all now. Clear? Okay, so as I said, this session is basically introducing you to the software, to its interface. And and knowing about what are the things we will be covering up in this particular module. What level of details can we go through in Revit? Like you would come to know looking at the interface itself this time. Okay, so let's share my okay, let's start it over. I've already shared. Okay, so this is the first interface of Revit whenever you open it. Okay, this is the first most interface. So in this particularly, depending on the version of Revit, there might be a bit of change in the interface, but the options remain the same. Okay, so the display changes, the options would remain the same. So let's get started with the first interface. So in this, if you see on the left hand side, you do have what are models and families. So what are this? Basically, models is a place where you would actually be modeling your structure, modeling your project. Okay, that's where you start with your project. That's where the working goes on. Okay, from your start till the end, model space. That's a model space which you'll be using. So you have option for that, and then you have an option of families. So what is families? Basically, as we know, Revit is a documentation software. Similarly, Revit is also known to be a family based software. What does that mean? What does family based software mean? Everything in Revit is a family. So if we just need to keep some things in mind, and one of the things is everything in Revit is a family. Every element in Revit is a family. That means whether it's a wall, whether it's a door, whether it's a window, whether it's annotations, whether it's a dimension, everything is a family. So in a very layman's term, you can say that in your model space, to create a model, to create a project, okay, whenever you start with it, what happens is you use your family files in your model space to create a structure. So in models, you have different families coming together to create a particular structure. So that's how the families work. So families is a different file altogether, and models is a different file. Models is a project, families is a single element. Clear? Now to go in detail, Revit is known to be a parametric software. Okay, what does that mean? You have in Revit, you have parametric families. So in detail, we'll be understanding how this works, no doubt, when you start with our session. So when we start with the first element itself, you will understand what does parametric families mean. But in let's say in a very common term, can anyone tell me what does parametric mean? Anyone? What does parametric mean?
Any element that has a parameters.
Sorry.
So one can any element that has a parameters. So one can have a certain properties or information related to that element. So it would be like designed by that, or matlab, it can be put by that. You can identify by that properties.
Okay, right. You are pretty
That's what
close.
I mean.
Yeah, I guess you have a bit of knowledge regarding Revit as well. So you are explaining it in terms of that as well. No doubt. That's perfect. You what you can say is to better explain it. What is parametric family? So let's take an example of a table. Okay, a common table. If you have a table family, okay, in that a table, what are the properties of a table? It has a length, it has breadth, it has a height, it has material to it, right? So you have different elements of it, different properties, you can see, not elements but properties. So these properties, if you have a table of length as 2 meters and the width is, let's say, 1 meter, okay, if you change the length from 4 meters to 3 meters, let's say, so what happens in Revit? If you change the length from 4 to 3, automatically not only the table top length changes, but the whole family, that is the legs of the table, also move with it. They are adjusted. Okay, that adjustment is basically why it is happening, because the family is a parametric family. So if you change the height of the table from let's say 0.5 to 1 meters, so automatically not only your leg height raises, but also the tabletop shifts. So the whole table is adjusted. So whatever elements are associated with that specific parameter, what is a parameter? The property, let's say the height, the length, okay, these are your parameters. So whatever other parameter which is associated, other element which is associated with that specific parameter, then that parameter also gets adjusted. So that's known as a parametric family. So in Revit, mostly we focus on parametric families, but you also have non-parametric families used at times. Whenever there is a need, where there is no need of parameter changing, we tend to use non-parametric families. But most of the times, like maximum 97%, we tend to use parametric families in Revit. So a door, a simple family of a door can be, the heights, the width, the let's say the material, everything can be changed because of it being parametric. So that is possible in Revit. Okay, so that's how families work, that's how parametric families work. So the whole concept of Revit as a software is based on this parameters, this parametric families. So if you understand the concept of families, automatically half of your job is done in Revit, I can say. Almost half of your learning of Revit would be pretty clear. Why? Because you are clear with the concept of families. So that's very important. Okay, so you have these models and families in Revit. Then whatever you see in your is basically the recently opened models, and this is basically the recently opened family. So you can see individual door tag, it's an annotation. Okay, you have an architectural family of a table, a truss, a structural family, a MEP family, might be a light or anything there, a switch, etc. All those are MEP families. So likewise, you would have different elements of and different families for those. Clear? So this is where the recently opened projects are. Now, regarding modeling in Revit, if you know this, you can model, no doubt. Okay, you can create a BIM model according to the detail level. Okay, but one of the major things in BIM is in the process of BIM is your common data environment. So everyone knows about it, right? We had talked about it in the last session. What is common data environment? It's a common platform for work sharing. Okay, so when you are into the environment, when actually two people are collaborating, that is, if an architectural team is in India, the structural team is in UK, and let's say MEP is in US, three different places, and they're working on the same model. Okay, same project, same model. How are they going to work? So they are going to use the common data environment. So if you are working in that sort of an environment, then you need your Autodesk ID for it. Every person, okay, who is working in the environment, BIM environment, has to have this ID, and it's a unique ID for each individual. No two people can use the same ID for the project. Each person a unique ID. So that's very important. Only if you have this ID, you can work on a common data environment. You can use Revit otherwise in case of modeling purpose, but for work sharing mode, for collaborating mode in the process, you need this particular ID. Okay, so this ID you'll find an importance when you actually start working. You'll find when we learn about collaboration as a concept as well, you'll come to know why this ID is important. Basically, this ID is the one which will help you to keep an authority over the elements which you have modeled. Okay, I can just tell you that right now. It's in very simple words. So for keeping the authority of whatever you are working on, this ID is going to help you out. Okay, so whenever you are working in such environment, the projects which are there on the common data environment would come down in here. Okay, you see here, they would come down in here. Right now we are not on any server, any common data environment, so you don't have any projects. You can see Revit cloud models, you don't have those. It's just because we are not on that particular platform. Yeah. Rest of the working in case of modeling as well, it remains the same. Only what differs is your collaboration. That's the only add-on. Otherwise, you can model a Revit model without this idea as well. It's not a compulsion that each Revit model has to be on common data environment. No, if you are a single person working, you need not be using a common data environment. You can work on your own systems. So that's how it works. Clear? Understood this part of Revit? Everyone? Any queries regarding this? If you all have understood, just give me a thumbs up. Everyone? Okay, cool. So now this was the first interface. Now whenever you start with your project, okay, you have to go into the model space and start with a project, and that's where the major interface of working comes into play. Okay, so for starting with a new project, this you'll go to your model space. So opening is opening an existing one. So if I go to new, that's where you start with your project. So if I say new, you have what is known as a template file. So can anyone tell me what is the meaning of a template file? it's not related to Revit. Every software has a template file, whether it's CAD, whether it's Revit, whether it's SketchUp. Every software will have a template file. So what is a template file? Anyone?
It's layout, ma'am. In which
But for
kind of layout?
architecture,
A single person right now. Satyendra, can you tell me yours first?
Ma'am, it may be it's layout, ma'am, like AutoCAD we use.
Okay, but what does it have? Like, what is the purpose of a template?
In which, ma'am, architect name, engineer names, all
Okay,
these things come.
okay. Yes, Priyanka. What about you?
yeah, it is a measurement file like for decimal points or for architectural points.
Okay. Yes, anyone else? Yes, Amarjyoti.
It does provide a certain working environment for work in the
Okay.
वहाँ पे
हाँ हिंदी में बोलो, नो
UI
प्रॉब्लम,
according change हो
चलेगा.
जाता है
क्या चेंज हो जाता है?
UI मतलब यूजर इंटरफेस जो भी है
Okay. Anyone else?
also gives measurements metric empirical वो सब चेंज हो जाता है वहाँ पे
Okay.
बस टेम्पलेट्स से यही है.
Okay. Yes. So basically, all of y'all, somewhere or the else, y'all are right. Okay. A bit touching towards the right part. Yes, Priyanka.
इसमें जो भी ड्राइंग है या फिर क्या बोलते हैं स्टाइलिश या फिर लेआउट वगैरह जो भी है तो वो स्पेसिफाई किया जाता है टेम्पलेट्स में.
Right. So yes. So basically, what is a template? Template in simple words can be like a template is where you have some standards set. Okay. Whether it's scale, that is whether the units, whether it's a metric based template, whether it's an imperial, feet and inches hai, hai, meters hai, वो units हो, चाहे let's say if you have some settings regarding the project, okay, like someone said architect's name, project details, etc., all those things. So likewise you'll have n number of options. Let's say dimension styles, वो भी एक set करके रखेंगे, तो वो एक template we can just have it created, okay, and save. Like if you according to your firm, okay, you'll have a standard. So if needed, that standard is going to be used in every project. So if needed, what we can do is we'll create a template with those standards and save it as a template, so that each project when you start you can directly open the template. You don't need to have all the settings done again and again while you start with a project. So that's where your templates come into play. So each software does have this. In Revit also you have these templates where your standards are set. Okay, so in this particular template file, basically if you have a drop down, you have different templates coming into play. And if you see carefully how the templates being created by default according to the disciplines. So architectural template alag hai, structural alag hai, mechanical alag hai, electrical alag hai. So you have it according to your disciplines. Okay, so what are disciplines in the BIM environment? They are nothing but your consultants, you can say. So if you are an architectural consultant, you're going to model an architectural model, you're concerned with architectural model, you will be selecting architectural template. The structural person would be selecting structural template, MEP the system template. So likewise. Okay, now by default when you drop down, you do have some templates, but mostly you don't select it from here. Why? Because sometimes, many of the times, the templates which you see in here are imperial based. What is imperial? Imperial is feet and inches, and in our field you usually tend to use okay, metric base. Why? Gives you much more precision. Inch and mm is much more preferred. Why? It will give you much more precision. So what you do is you go to browse, and you can see in your templates folder you have a number of options. So in here you have English imperial, you have English is the folder which you will be using. That's where your metric based templates, based templates are there, meters, etc. So we would be using the default metric. Okay, as an architectural model we'll be using default metric. If a structural person, let's say if an MEP person is modeling and he's just modeling a mechanical model, he would be just selecting mechanical default metric. If it's plumbing, the plumbing default. If he is modeling mechanical, plumbing, electrical all together in one model as an MEP model, he will be using system metric. Okay, so likewise what we are going to be using, we are going to use default metric, and I say open. Okay, so that's the importance of your templates. Clear? So yes, so now this is the major interface which you will be working on in a project. Okay, so you can see this interface and it would look similar to your CAD interface. Why? Because it is Autodesk, they compatibility the same developer, so they'll have Autodesk softwares, they will tend to have the same interface mostly. If you go forward and look forward to Navy's work as a software, if you open the software, the interface for that is also similar to this. Okay, so let's get started with it and just understand what are the different options, what we are going to look forward to, etc. Okay, so basically this white blank space is the one where you will be modeling. Okay, workspace, major workspace. The four icons which you see, those are the default elevations: north, south, east and west. Default. No doubt you can be creating your own elevations later on, so as we move forward you'll be learning about it, but these are the default ones. You are in which view right now? Level 1, floor plan. How do you come to know? You have what is known as a project browser. What is a project browser? Browsing throughout the project, as the name suggests. So you can go to any view in your project using this particular project browser. So you can see floor plans, ceilings, elevations. If you create schedules, if you create sections, create sheets, you can go to any view from this project browser. So right now, what is the highlighted one? It's level 1, right? So level 1 floor plan, that's the active view. Let's say I want to go to my south elevation. So you can see you can toggle between two tabs. So right now the active is south elevation. So plan view, elevation view, ceiling plan, so it has different views set. Clear? So that's your project browser. Now most important is your properties. So everyone here knows that any software, okay, any element in that particular software will have its own properties. So each element has its own property. So in case of CAD, let's say you draft a line. So a line in CAD also has its properties, as we know, right? So it can be in which layer it is in, what is the line weight of it, the line type of it, line color of it, right? So all these different options you do have. So similar to that in Revit as well, each element has its own properties. Now with this sentence, what is one thing we need to understand? Each element has its own property. So in Revit, we know that every element is a family, right? Everything in Revit is a family, even annotation. So these icons which you see, these are also families. Okay, they are coming into the model to create the whole model, etc. So this particular icon is also a family. So this icon, this family will also have its own properties. So whenever you have an element, if you select that element, whatever you see in here is particularly the properties of that particular element, that particular family. Okay, so let's say if I select this particular element, whatever you see in here are the properties of this particular element, particular family. Now everything is a family, so this particular element has its own family. It is a different family. So I'll just give you a gist. You can see all these are different family and types. So you will have n number of options into it. So each family will have its own properties. Okay, so whatever you see in here is known as an instance property. You have two types of properties in Revit: instance and type. Okay, each family is going to have two properties: instance and type properties. Whatever you see in here are your instance properties, whereas if you go to edit type, whatever you will see in edit type is basically your type property of the family. Okay, so what is the difference? If you see, I'll just give you one sentence. Remember that it would be a bit difficult to understand right now, but once we start, the first element itself will make it clear for you. And to be very frank, if you understand what I'm saying now, the concept of it, automatically half of your job would be done. Why? Because it is a family based thing. Clear? So right now I selected this element, and whatever you see in here is instance. So if I change any value of any parameter, these are all the parameters of it. Okay, if I change any value for it, for any parameter over here in your instance property, it would only be applied to the selected element. Okay, only the selected item would take the changes. Whereas if I select this element, and I go to edit type. Okay, if I change any value in case of any parameter in your type properties, it would not only apply to the selected elements, but it would be applied to wherever you have used this particular family and type. So if you have used this particular family and type 10 times in the whole project, okay, it would be applied everywhere. All the 10 walls would be taken. Why? Because you're changing it in your type properties. Whereas if you select an element and change an instance, it's only for that selected element. It's element specific instance. Clear? So if you understand this concept, automatically half of your job is done. Why? Because you've understood the concept of families, the properties of it, instance and type properties. Clear, everyone? This part? Okay? Yeah. So this is very important. The whole concept, the whole Revit as a software is based on this. Why? Because it's a family based software. So you have to know this. If you know this, everything is done. Okay? So this is how the properties work. We'll be looking forward later on, okay, in detail. Then you have your tabs in here. So these tabs are going to help you to basically model your project. So the first few tabs in here are basically, discipline related. So each discipline has its own tab. So if you're talking about architectural modeling, the first tab, architecture tab, deals with architectural models. Structure, steel, precast deals with your structural. System deals with your MEP modeling. Clear? So we have different tabs specifically for individual disciplines. So architecture tab, as you can see, your building element, whether it's a wall, door, window, roofing, floors, okay, your circulation elements, your staircases, railings, etc. All the commands, direct commands are specified here. So you can use these commands to model your project, to model your structure. Yes, whenever you're modeling, it's just not 3D modeling, remember, it's information modeling. So you have to input all the data. So it might be your materials, the layering of the walls, the costing of it, the non-graphical data, properties, right? So everything needs to be input. So that's how your modeling would work. Okay. Similarly, in case of structure, it's related to structure, as you can see, reinforcement bars, foundations, etc. Clear? So all these are related to structure. In case of systems, it's related to MEP modeling. So your mechanical, okay, plumbing, electrical modeling, you'll be using these particular direct commands. Okay, after this, whatever you see, whichever tabs you have, they are common for every discipline. So every discipline uses it. So the insert tab, as you can see, as the name suggests, inserting different files. So it's not only Revit, but it's Revit, CAD, PDFs, images. If you're using any files for references, you'll be using your insert tab. That will help you. So you can link, you can import. So we'll be looking forward to what is the difference between the two as well, linking and importing. So don't worry about that. But you can bring in different models from different softwares in your for your references. Okay. Then you have annotate tab. Now annotate tab is the most important tab in Revit. Why? Because this tab is used for documentation, and as we know, Revit is a documentation software. So your documentation, what does that mean? Your working drawings, your construction drawings, the drawings which are going to help you to construct your structure on site. So those drawings are basically created, detailed out using your annotate tab. Okay, so you can see dimensions, text, details, tagging. Tagging is a very important concept, so we'll be looking into it as well. So all these are nothing but detailing it out, right? Your construction drawings are basically generated from this. This tab is the only tab in Revit which is a 2D tab. What does that mean? Every other tab which you see, so if you model any element using any command in your architectural tab, let's say in architectural you have what is known as a model line. So if I use model line and modeler line in your view, okay, in level 1, it is not only going to be visible in level 1, but it is also going to be visible in 3D, right? Whereas if you use detail line from the annotate tab and create a line on level 1, it is only going to be viewed in level 1. It is not going to be viewed in 3D. Why? Because annotate tab is a 2D tab. So it's you can say in simple words, it's a view specific tab. Okay, so that's the major thing. Annotate tab is the only tab in Revit which is 2D tab. Okay, and this is going to be very important. Clear? Analyzing is something related to structure and MP calculation, so that's not of our concern right now. Then you have massing and site. So massing and site in Revit, basically the tab is divided into two parts. Massing is something related to conceptual level. Okay, so we tend to use SketchUp format. So if a person is going to be using Revit for conceptual level, he can use massing tab. So that's not what we concern with right now. What we want is your site tab. What is site? Site tab would be related to your site elements, whether it's your topo surface, topography, okay, your site components, your trees, your let's say even your street light, your parking, okay, vehicles, etc., roads, all those things to model, to document, to be documented in Revit, you will be using your site tab. Now in case of site tab, from 2024 version, you have a bit difference. Okay, it is the same, but they have just made it much more simple in case of 2024, whereas before that you had what a bit you had topo surface. In case of 2024 onwards, you have topo solids. So there is a very minor difference. Actually they have made it much more easier for you, so you'll understand this better when you actually learn about certain things. Right now it would be vague explaining, so no worries at all, we won't go into detail of it. Okay, we'll come to collaborate at the last. Then you have view tab. As the name suggests, view, creating views, generation of different views, whether plans, section, elevations, schedules, material takeoff, 3D view generations, blown up details, everything, sheets, they can be generated. All these are different types of views, right? So these can be generated using your view tab. Also view tab has another purpose, that is view, as the name suggests. So graphics, how is it going to be viewed? So all the graphical standards can be set in your view tab using graphics. Okay, so line weights of individuals, if you want to have any changes in case of this particular view, you can set those, okay, using your graphics. Clear? Then you have manage. So as the name suggests, managing your project. So you have options of managing the basic settings. So you can see project settings, material settings, your different project elements which you have settings of those. So let's say line weights, line types, etc., those can be preset. So all those settings would be available in your manage settings info. Okay, then you also have in this is manage links, which is also present in your insert tab, because that's where you'll be linking, right? Manage links. So it's the same command. So any file which you have actually linked, not imported, if you have linked any file, you can manage those. You can refresh it, you can delete it, you can link another file. So you can use your manage links command for doing all those things. So that's how manage tabs works. It's managing your project in different ways. Okay, then you have add-ins. What is add-ins? Add-ins is basically where you'll have your plugins coming into play. So sometimes whenever you'll create, like have downloaded a plugin, it would come under add-ins, or else it would be generated as a separate tab. So as you see, you might not have it, but as you see, I had I have a plugin which is Enscape for Revit. So it's not coming under add-ins, but it's coming as a separate tab. Similarly, I have one more plugin in your MLabs, so that is also coming as a different tab. So likewise, it can either come under add-ins or it can come as a separate tab. Okay. Then you have modify tab. Modify is the most used tab. Why? Modifying. So modifying your created elements, whether you want to have basic modify, copy, paste, mirror, move, rotate, right? All those things can be done using your modify tab. So it's modifying the created element, whether it's a door, whether it's a window, whether it's a wall, anything can be done using modifying it. So it's most widely used. Okay, so these are the different tabs. Now in this, all these tabs which we had seen right now, all of them are going to be used for your modeling, right? So you are creating your BIM model using these tabs. So your model is ready, your BIM model is ready as per the standards, but how are you actually exchanging this information? Common data environment, right? If you're working on the BIM environment, how are you going to exchange? How are you collaborating? So common data environment is a common server. So that means two people working on the same file at the same time. So how is that happening? That's happening using your collaborate tab. So your collaborate tab is basically how practically you're going to use Revit in the BIM environment. Let's say for work sharing. Rest of them are for creation of the BIM model. This is for sharing the BIM model which you're creating. Sorry. Okay. So in collaborate as well, you have two parts: coordination, collaboration. Just one moment. Sorry. Yeah. Coming back to collaborate tab. In collaborate tab, you have two parts into it: coordination and collaboration. Coordination happens between models, collaboration happens between two people. So in BIM environment, a project does not have one single file, it has multiple files. So how are those files going to be coordinated? How are those files going to be working together? That's using coordinate. Okay. Whereas if two people are working on the same project, how are they going to work? They are going to use collaboration. So that's how it is divided. Okay. So this is the very end stage of our course module where you'll actually learn how to share. Okay. It's much more of a conceptual level as well. So this is how it would be working. Other than that, every other tab is basically your creation of BIM model tab. Okay. So with perspective of BIM, what are the things to keep in mind? That's what other tabs do. That's what we'll be learning using other tabs. Okay. So these are the different tabs. Now in this, if you see up here, you have shortcuts for the frequently used icons, or sorry, frequently used commands. So these icons basically are different commands which are also present in your tabs. Okay. So here you have some commands, so we'll be looking forward to those as well. Now coming back in here, you have, if you see here, you do have some icons. So we'll be looking forward to different icons later on, but the first three are the important ones. What are these? So the first one itself defines the scale of the view. So it's view specific. Remember, by default it is view specific. So is this particular level 1 floor plan 1 is to 100 scale, or is it 1 is to 200, is it 1 is to 2000? What is the scale for this particular floor plan? So it's view specific. You can have your scale set. The second option which you have is coarse, medium and fine. So what is this? This is nothing but your LOD. As we had talked about level of detailing in the last session, your that's the same thing. So your coarse is the conceptual level, fine is the most detailed level. So fine is basically your construction drawing stages. So LOD 300. From there onwards, fine starts. So that's how you have coarse, medium and fine. Okay. And then you have your graphic display options. That is, how is your model going to be viewed for this particular view? It's these three are all view specific by default. So how is this particular view going to be viewed? So is it going to be hidden line? Is it going to be shaded? Is it going to be realistic? How is the view going to be displayed? You can set these. Usually while you're working, okay, working on your project, you tend to keep it hidden lines and shaded. If you want it to be in a realistic mode, while extraction of data, while you're taking off it as a PDF or as a print, you can make it realistic for that moment and take it over. Again, when you start working, hidden line and shaded. Why? The reason for it now. That's because, as we know, Revit is a documentation software, and by looking at the interface, by what we have known right now, okay, what are the different options, etc., you come to know that at a certain point, you have so much of information into Revit, graphical, non graphical. You have so much of information into it that after a point, Revit tends to become slow. Okay. It might become so on large scale, that tends to happen. So what we have to do is we try to reduce the load over it, right, so that you can work smoothly. So one of the ways of doing it is working in hidden line and shaded mode. So that's one thing we need to keep in mind. Okay. And whenever you're working on projects, work in fine mode. It gives you much more precision. Clear? Rest of the icons in here are different commands like revealing the hidden elements, your sun paths, okay, setting of certain views, locking of certain 3D views, etc. So that's how these different elements come into play. Okay, so this is how the interface works. Now in this particular thing, what we missed out, very simple thing. If you go to any elevation, you can see it is showing you some measurements, that is 0 and 4000. If you go to south, so level 1 is 0, level 2 is 4000. Now we know that when you selected the template, it was a metric based template, so we know it's not feet and inches, it's either it's either centimeter, it's either meters, or it's either kilometers, whatever it is, we know that. But here when you're starting up, what is it? Is it is it 4000 is it 4000 centimeter, what it is, we don't know about that. So always remember, whenever you start with a project, first check that over. So for that, un, okay, un is your project units. You all, that's a shortcut, no enter, no space, just un. Or else you can go to manage, okay, and you can see in your settings you have project units. Okay, in this you can see there is length option. If you just click on it, what does it say? Units So whatever units the length option has, that's the unit for your project. If I change it from here to meters, let's say, you can see automatically they have changed. Now even if your project is in metric, okay, we have selected metric, what if I make this as feet and fractional inches? It would be done. Why? Because that's how Revit works, it's parametric, you just need to change it. So 0, 4000. So those are the default units in Revit. But always remember, whenever you start, check it over. It is always better. Okay. So that's how basically Revit works. That's how we'll be also looking forward to it. So now in this process, what did we get? Okay, when we look at the interface itself, we can see there are so many options, so many ways. Now these commands which you see are direct commands, but it's not a compulsion that a ramp would be modeled using a ramp command itself. There might arise a situation where you cannot use a ramp command to model a ramp due to some reasons, okay, because the output which is required is not achieved using ramp command. So you have different options to it. Sometimes you might also use flow to create a ramp, but it depends whether you can, okay, because whatever is the output required, accordingly you'll be deciding. In components also, you have what is known as a model and face component. You can create a ramp using that as well. So how to decide what command to use or how to model a specific element, that would be developed only if you work, only when you have worked over a project or two in detail. Okay, so you, if you start working over a project, you have done 2 to 3 projects, automatically you'll have that understanding. No, Baba, this is not going to work, I need to find another way, I need to explore a bit to find out what I can do in this particular situation, because there are n number of ways, n number of possibilities of modeling a single element in Revit. Clear? So that's how vast Revit can be. As I said, as you develop, as you explore, it would be interesting for you. You can create and document any element in you, creating your own, let's say if you have a door for a project, and that's the door which you want to create because you don't have that specific family, you can create it according to the requirement. So that's how detailed you can go as well. Clear? So this is one thing we need to keep in mind while we are working over Revit. No doubt, at first it is going to seem a bit tedious and at times also very slow, but eventually, once you have the basics at the start done properly, in the end stage of the project, it's going to be very quick. It would be very quick, and I guarantee you that if you're using BIM as a process, if you're using Revit, let's take an example of Revit, not BIM as a whole project, just an example of Revit itself. If you are working on a project on CAD, okay, and if you're working on the same project in Revit, there's a huge difference. Why? If you are a single person, if you're using CAD, you can manage 2 projects or 3 projects at a time. Chalo, that's okay. But if you're using Revit as a software, after a certain point, I'll tell you that you can manage a lot more than what you can using CAD, because it saves a lot of time. A lot of time. That is, you can at least manage 5 to 6 projects individually using Revit. That's how Revit can give you or create an impact over it, because of the time it consumes. The same job can be done if CAD takes 5 hours, the same job can be done in Revit using like within an hour or two. So just imagine the difference. So that's how it works basically. Clear? Everyone, so this is how the interface of Revit would be, and that's what we'll also be learning through. Also, we had seen in the last session what level we want to reach, right? Just keep that in mind. What I can also show you is one of our students work, just a reference. So just a moment, I'll